Welcome to the Stabilization Grant Documentation tutorial. The purpose of this tutorial is to assist programs in completing their reconciliation. This tutorial will provide information about how to document expenses from Stabilization Grant funds. If you have questions about how to navigate the reconciliation, please refer to the Phase 3 Reconciliation tutorial on Okra's website. This tutorial will focus on all program types. There is some information at the end that's specifically for family child care programs. Before diving into expense documentation, let's start with some background information. There is a reconciliation required for all programs who receive stabilization grant funds. This requires providing information for the total of the requested funds. There will only be one reconciliation regardless of how many applications were submitted and approved for the phase. There are two types of reconciliation activities: expense report and desk review. The first is the reconciliation expense report. All programs with an approved application are required to submit an expense report. An expense report is a subtotal of your expense documentation by subgrant activity. Please do not round the dollar amounts as we need exact totals to be reconciled for each activity. Each activity should have a dollar and cents amount. If you find that an activity selected in the application has $0, then 0 can be entered. The subtotal amount entered for each subgrant can meet or exceed the subgrant requested amounts. The second type of reconciliation activity is the desk review. 20% of programs will receive a desk review. If a program is selected for a desk review, they will receive an OPR notification and an upload button will appear at the bottom of the expense report. Programs are required to upload their documentation to support each of the amounts recorded on the expense report. All reconciliations, including desk reviews, must be submitted by July 31st, 2023. Please submit your program's reconciliation when you have all expense information from spending the funds. To avoid longer than usual wait times for approval, please do not wait until July 31st to submit. Failure to complete reconciliation activities may result in the program being required to repay the funds back to Okra. The expense period is the time frame when the funds need to be used. The expense period for Stabilization Grant Phase 3 is July 1st, 2022 through June 30th, 2023. Your expense receipts, paid invoices, and documentation will need to have dates within this period. Information about allowable and non-allowable items can be found in the Phase 3 Application Guidance document located on Okra's website. If your program has a question about the document, please submit your question to support@okra.org with your program's license number. Now we will talk more about expense documentation. Expense documentation includes documents from a third-party vendor for goods or services that shows itemized order and payment information. Please clearly label all receipts, invoices, etc. with the subgrant and subgrant activity that the expense is being applied to. If you are a program administrator of multiple sites, it is possible that information provided will be for multiple sites. Please provide the allocation among the sites in addition to the subgrant and subgrant activity labels. Here are forms of acceptable documentation. Please note that they include order and payment information. Third-party payroll journals or timesheets with paycheck stubs. Store receipt with date and itemized purchase information and how the transaction was paid. Copy of invoice and canceled check showing the invoiced amount paid in full. A canceled check is a check that has been paid by the bank. After the money is deducted from the checking account, the bank will cancel the check so it cannot be used again. Copy of itemized shipping form with amounts and copy of canceled check. Copy of itemized order form or shipping form with amounts and copy of credit card receipt or statement. Copy of order form and copy of canceled check. Copy of online order confirmation reflecting actual prices paid with payment information. Here are some items to keep in mind when submitting documentation. Credit card statements or bank statements are a great source of payment information. Please understand that we do not need to see your account number, but we need to make sure the account name matches that of the program name or owner name. Handwritten receipts will not be accepted. A handwritten receipt includes purchasing a receipt book from an office supply store and handwriting information. Some companies use form template receipts that include the company name and contact information and use this form to handwrite details of the services provided. This format is acceptable. Cash transactions must not be used with these funds as it is difficult to document the information needed for grant reconciliation activities. Transactions through Cash Apps can be used as long as the reporting through the Cash App company includes the date of the transaction, including the year, the individual or company paid, amount paid, and reason for the payment. If it is payroll related, a pay period must be included. The next portion of the tutorial is for family child care providers only. Family child care providers can pay themselves with stabilization grant funding. There are 4 possible subgrant activity options for paying yourself in family child care. Personnel cost underneath the operating cost subgrant, and increased wages, retention bonus, and hazard pay under workforce recruitment and retention subgrant. Next, we will walk through the documentation to prove payments made to pay yourself. The first is using a canceled check. Write yourself a check. In the memo line, describe the payment, such as personnel costs for September and October 2022. Deposit the check, and a copy of both sides of the canceled check would be what is provided to Okra in the upload if selected for a desk review. In the memo line of the check, include the following information for each activity option. For personnel cost, list months or pay periods being paid. For increased wages, provide the old rate and the new rate. Show the calculation of the difference between the rates times the amount of hours, pay periods, or months equal to the total amount claimed. For example, the new rate per hour is $11 minus the old rate per hour of $10 is a $1 difference times 40 hours equals $40 amount claimed on the reconciliation. For retention bonus, the provider must have a retention policy and agreement as stated in the manual procedure letter. These documents do not need to be uploaded in the case of a desk review. For hazard pay, the rate of hazard pay and listing months or pay periods being paid. Depositing funds into another account. If selected for a desk review, provide the deposit ticket and bank statements for both accounts showing the transfer. On the documentation, provide the following memos based on activity options. For personnel cost, list months or pay periods being paid. For increased wages, provide the old rate and the new rate. Show the calculation of the difference between the rates times the amount of hours, pay periods, or months equal to the total amount claimed. For example, the new rate per hour is $11 minus the old rate per hour of $10 is a $1 difference times 40 hours equals $40 amount claimed on the reconciliation. For retention bonus, the provider must have a retention policy and agreement as stated in the manual procedure letter. For hazard pay, the rate of hazard pay and listing months or pay periods being paid. A bank statement that the funds were deposited. If selected for a desk review, provide a copy of the bank statement that the funds were deposited. On the documentation, provide the following memos based on activity option. For personnel cost, list months or pay periods being paid. For increased wages, provide the old rate and the new rate. Show the calculation of the difference between the rates times the amount of hours, pay periods, or months equal to the total amount claimed. For example, the new rate per hour is $11 minus the old rate per hour of $10 is a $1 difference times 40 hours equals $40 amount claimed on the reconciliation. For retention bonus, the provider must have a retention policy and agreement as stated in the manual procedure letter. For hazard pay, the rate of hazard pay and listing months or pay periods being paid. Keep in mind that the expense period began July 1st, 2022, so you cannot include dates prior to that date. You cannot prepay wages, so you cannot include dates after the date you resubmit the reconciliation. Thank you for watching the Stabilization Grant documentation tutorial. If you still have questions about your documentation, please submit questions to support@okra.org with your program's license number.